You probably didn't know that there's people who live along the levee along the Mississippi River in Louisiana. And the story of these houses is really fascinating. Here's downtown New Orleans. And then down here along the Mississippi River, there's 12 homes along its banks. Only 12 left in the entire country along the Mississippi River, right here in New Orleans. They're called Batcher houses because they're on the Batcher, or levee. I spent the day at one of these houses right here talking with the owner. He's an author named Macon Try. Macon sits along the banks of this river right here, enjoying the river life. There's no place like it in the country. And one day, none of this might even be here. And that's a shame. Macon's lived here along the banks of the Mississippi River since 1986. He wrote a book about life on the Mississippi. It's called They Called Us River Rats. Here's the story of Macon Try. Well, it's got to be the most. There's not very many people that live on the banks down here in New Orleans.
There's nobody except these 12 remaining camps. These are the last of what were once thousands of homes on both sides of the river down here. Thousands. And some of them were like stilt houses like these, and some of them were like floating homes, shanty boats, not to dignify it with houseboat, but shanty boats. And some of them were places where shanty boats that had like grown legs been put up on stilts. And, still had the beams and the hull and everything under it, and they just raised them up and made them into dwellings. But now there's 12 houses left. That's it.
It must be really unique living right here. What's it like to live right along the river right here? What's it like?
I think the most, obviously I've had a chance to think about it a lot, and the most remarkable thing, the thing that grabs me every day is the sense of this giant horizon, this like beautiful open river. And on the other side, looking towards the levee, there's a huge open horizon because we're higher than any of the houses in the city, really. This is the river is the high ground. And I'm up over the river on stilts, so there's this sense of just tremendous spaciousness here. And I think that's probably, and everything that accompanies that sense of spaciousness, sunrises, sunsets, the way that you always know, like your sense of direction, where the sun is going to be, where the moon is going to be, because you're living with so much sky and so much open space. And it's really unique to be in a place as culturally rich as New Orleans, and as culturally rich, of course, as the river itself, but to still be in all of this openness. I think that's why people say, boy, it's like you live in the country here. I mean, not really. There's like a power plant across the river, and there's a grain elevator, and if you get up on my roof, you can see the roof of the Superdome, and the city's right there, but it's this sense of space. I've had a number of serial careers that were largely unrelated, if you want to call them careers, but endeavors. And the only real job that I ever had was teaching in the public schools here in New Orleans. I taught young adults with autism, and I did that for 20 years, and maybe overstayed, but I was able to retire half pay on that minuscule salary. But it didn't matter because here I was living on the river. I didn't need the money, and so that job just afforded me tremendous opportunity to build the house where I am now. The house that I bought here, I jacked it up because it flooded, and so I had all these interviews with people that lived here. I had started talking to people that lived up here in the 20s and 30s and recording their stories. I always thought someday I'd tell this story, but I felt like I didn't have enough information to write a book, and I just sat on those interviews and farmed and gardened. And when my back gave out, it was after Katrina, I dove back into that, and suddenly all of our newspapers were online digitally from like the 1800s, and I could start looking up the Batcher and shanty boats and river people, and I found all these incredible stories of thousands of people living on the river. And right here in New Orleans, right here where we're sitting, there were 120 camps between here and Audubon Park. And that led me into my latest endeavor, which was writing a book about the people that lived here and the people that came down the river on shanty boats.
Oh.
And it's the story of New Orleans' last Batcher settlement, which is where we are now. It's only 12 camps now, but that settlement is like a telescope or whatever to look upriver at like all the people that settled here were people that came down the river. Most of them came down the river on shanty boats. They floated down from Indiana, they floated down from the Trans-Appalachian frontier. They came from all over, and they were looking for work, they were looking for a place to live, they were looking, some of the first ones were people that after this Civil War were shell-shocked veterans. And there were a lot of kooks and stuff that just, took the river to like get away from everything else. It's the same reason that people were moving here when I moved here, the same reason that people have always gone to fringe communities. And so it was quite a real revelation when I started talking to people here and reading about that.
What kind of person goes to a fringe community?
Well, like I said, I think there's people that are trying to escape. There's refugees, there's economic refugees, there's refugees of floods in the Ohio River Valley, people that were washed out that were living on in camps and houses and houseboats on the river up there that just got washed out by floods and floated down. There were people that were refugees from their own nuttiness or their own problems or whatever, that felt like the freedom of being on the river would give them an opportunity for a better life. So there's all sorts of reasons that people move to fringe communities.
Did you get a better life when you moved here?
Oh, an immeasurably better life. This community is the glue between me and New Orleans. I can't say that totally because I've made so many friends, and a lot of them people that were interested in the river and that have come by, So the river was instrumental in many of my friendships, but yeah, the river, changed my life completely. People have lived on the Batcher here, this area between the low and high water mark, since the 1890s. And for most of that time, nobody had any title to the property, never paid any taxes. It was a place of refuge, a place of retreat. It was a place where a person like me in the 80s that didn't have any money, or even my buddy Rob for a while, could afford to live, and have the world's biggest front yard. Because, this is like having 1,000 acres. Now you can't go out and walk on it, but unless you can walk on water, but it's still this beautiful open space. But the Batcher can be privately owned. This area between the high and low water mark, it's kind of a misconception that everybody on the Batcher is a squatter, because there's privately owned Batcher all over the place, and there's shipping concerns that own Batcher property, and there's farmers that graze their cattle on Batcher. So the Batcher can be privately owned, but the state and federal government and city and Corps of Engineers, all these other entities, including shipping entities, can have, I guess we could call it easements. That's not the technical term, but essentially they have the right, if there's an emergency or a special need, to claim that land and take it back from the private individuals that are living on it. That's a fact. That fact exists today, even though people up here claim ownership of the property. I claim ownership. I've paid taxes as long as I've lived here on this property, and there's been lawsuits by other private individuals from the distant past that claim to own it, and they lost in court. So I'm not interested in going to court and trying to establish the fact that I have title to it. I'm happy to pay taxes, be a good citizen, live here and love it, and not stir that hornet's nest and not dip into those waters. But I would defend my right, my ownership, The river is more predictable than you would think. The Corps of Engineers and the National Weather Service have kind of got it figured out to where they can predict spring flooding, which is usually what we get here. The river here is so broad, it's so deep that it can accommodate a vast amount of flood water. So even if it's flooding upriver down here, we seldom feel any risk here. And like I mentioned to you earlier, there's really, I don't worry about flooding just because I'm not a worrier of that nature. That's something I couldn't really control. And I'm going to live here until the camp washes away, a storm takes it away, the government tears it down. It just, I'm going to be here in any case.
So were you here during Katrina?
Yeah.
What was that? Was it just like how high up is the river?
Well, I'll tell you this, I'm a stayer. So I'm always here. If I'm not here, I'm losing my mind trying to get back if there's a hurricane coming, because I want to be in such an event. There's only so many opportunities in life to experience that, and I live in this place where this incredible force of nature is released. And I'm not afraid of drowning, and I'm not going to worry that a tornado might just strike here, although it could happen, So I'm always, there's no point asking were you there unless, like, I missed Hurricane Ida because I couldn't make it back and they closed the airport. But to your question about Katrina, that came like most hurricanes do down here in the Gulf, came in late summer when the river is at a really low stage. If you think about it, there's not that much rain in late summer, in the fall usually, and so the watershed was pretty low. The river was at 2 feet above sea level, 2 feet above Gulf level. That's really low. I had probably 40 feet, certainly 30 feet of beach, maybe 40 feet of beach beyond where we're sitting now. And we have water under us now because the river now in the spring is at 12.5 feet. And the next morning, the river was at about 12 feet. It had come up to 14 feet, and by like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, it was back at 2 feet. So in like 12 hours, the river went up 12 feet and went down 12 feet. Like a 24-foot change in 12 hours. It's kind of like a tsunami or something,
What is it right now? What's the depth right now?
It's 12.5 feet above Gulf level. The depth underneath of us here, our deck here is probably at 19 feet or something. So we've got a lot of freeboard here. And I won't be able to fish until the river gets up to 14 feet. The fish need a little bit more. I think we probably have 3 feet under us. I'm not doing the math, but we probably have 3 feet of water out there now. And the catfish want more water. They want it warmer. And so when the river comes up and the sun's beating on it in the shallows here, it can get warmer and we get scads of catfish up in here.
I have to know a few examples of some interesting things you've seen go right past your backyard.
Well, one of the things that really inspired me, that I actually caught, it didn't just go past, was a rectangular piece of wood. It was like a 4x4. It was bobbing in the river. It got stuck in a willow tree here, and it had an eye hook on it. And I realized this was like a man-made object, and I just hopped in my canoe and paddled out and snagged it and flipped it over, and it has a tag on it. I still have it inside. It has a tag, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. So this float had come down either from the Kansas River, or certainly had to come down the Missouri and come down the Mississippi, like 1,000 miles or whatever, come from possibly the upper river all the way down here and ended up in front of my house. And it was just long before I thought of writing the book, this was something where I realized the connection between this community and myself and all of my neighbors thousands of miles upstream. So that was really a great find, and I guess that there's unusual things all the time. I mean, I've caught, a 40-pound white catfish out here. I've caught 2 snow white, I don't know if they're albino, but snow white catfish off of this pier. And I don't know how unusual they are, but I let them go because for me it was unusual because I catch, thousands of catfish out here, but only 2 white ones. But the sense of finding stuff is key to living on a river. I mean, it's key to the joy that I find in living on a river. There's no telling what'll wash up. Lots of building materials. I got a ship buoy in my driveway. I'm always pulling stuff in. Sometimes I throw it back in because I'm like, what am I doing with this? It has no value except for the beauty of the item. Sometimes it's more beautiful floating down the river than it is in my yard.
Are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. And I can also help you find your new house too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home too. That's right. I know awesome, reliable agents all over the country, and I'd love to connect you to somebody who can help you search for that perfect home. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.